Rochester, how you feeling? We got a war for order, a war for gold, a war for money, and a war for souls. War on terror, war on drugs, war on kindness, war on hugs, war on birds, and a war on bees. They got a war on hippies trying to save the trees. War with jets, and a war with missiles. War with high C, the government officials. Wall Street, war on high finance. War on people who just love to dance. War on music, war on speech, war on teachers and the things they teach. A war for the last 500 years.
There are so many voices in this country that are speaking up, and active people active in their communities, that I'm not talking about a fringe minority or a silent majority, but the silenced majority, silenced by the mainstream media. The media today represents a minority elite. These all have to be challenged, and many people are doing it.
It's Michael Franti here.
This is Amy Goodman with
Rochester Indymedia.
Hi, you're watching Rochester Indymedia, IndyTV. I'm the barefoot host, Dawn. Check out our website. Go to rochester.indymedia.org, post an article, get involved. And today we have a great topic. We're talking about ADAPT, Grassroots Radical Disability Rights organization, with friends that I'm so happy to have here. ADAPT is near and dear to my heart. We have Anita Cameron and Mustafa, aka Moose Hayes, in the studio today. And we're going to be talking about the work they do and some of their experience as disabled community members and the activism that they do around these issues. So thanks for coming, guys.
You're welcome.
And Anita, why don't we start with you? You work for Center for Disability Rights. Rochester is so fortunate to have such an incredible organization that had a beautiful new building built recently. And tell me a little bit about your role there and what CDR does.
Well, I'm the systems advocate for Center for Disability Rights, and I've been there for 18 months. And I work on the local, national, and state level. I tell people that there are two types of advocacy. There's your individual advocacy that you do, for an individual, a loved one, a consumer, a friend. And then there's the systems advocacy where you change laws, policies, practices. And so that's what I do. I help to change policies that negatively affect people with disabilities. I help to get laws passed to help people with disabilities gain their rights and live in the community. And I've actually helped to write a piece of legislation that's sitting in Congress as we speak.
Oh, terrific. And Moose, now you're one of these individuals that was helped by CDR, and just tell us a little bit about how you made that connection with Center for Disability Rights and how that came about.
Well, I had a stroke in August of '07, and I was in a nursing home. And by Thanksgiving, I was walking. And a friend of mine was dealing with CDR, and she introduced me to her, and I got out really fast in February.
Uh-huh. And that's a main component of CDR's work, is helping people then, like advocating for people like Moose, and how does that happen?
Yes, that's our transition and diversion program, and it definitely helps people with disabilities who are in nursing facilities or other institutions to transition successfully back into the community. And we have an independent living program where people with disabilities can come and get training on certain aspects of independent living. We have peer support. We have a benefits program where people can get help in getting the benefits that they need, whether it's food stamps or Medicaid or you name it. We have a loan closet so people can borrow items like wheelchairs or other adaptive equipment or any kind of equipment that they need until they're able to get their own. And I've actually had to use that loan closet. Mm-hmm. And we have our advocacy department, of course, a host of other departments. So.
And that's what you said, you use the closet. That's the one great thing about Center for Disability Rights. You go in and people, disabled staff and clients, there's not there's a distinction of people who are working there, but it's a great mix because everybody's involved in the process and the work, it seems like.
Exactly. It's a really, my job, I consider it to be my dream job. It's a fun job. It's hectic, it's stressful, as any job can be, but it is so much fun and it's so interesting, you know, the things I get to do and the people that I get to meet.
And what are the big campaigns? Is there a big campaign you're working on?
Right now we're working on getting some state funding to establish an independent living center in Ontario County. Right now there are 2 bills in the state legislature. A 10440 is in the Assembly, and S7264 is in the Senate. And what those bills would do is address the unmet need for an independent living center in Ontario County. Currently, CDR serves 109 people out of our Geneva office, which is really skeleton crew, if you will, but they serve 109 people. Most of them are in Ontario County, and some are in Wayne and Yates counties. But right now, because CDR doesn't get any state independent living funding, the services that the people get are restricted to the Consumer-Directed Personal Attendant Services Program. An independent living center will obviously offer the entire array of services for people with disabilities. And so with the funding and the establishment of that, CDR can then open up an entire independent living center that would meet that.
Thank you. You're a young-looking man. Now, you seem
Thank
to be young to have had such an experience like a stroke, or maybe it really
I'm
can
not
happen.
really young. I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
Okay, I want to ask on TV.
Because it'll bust the mystique.
Well, tell me though, now, you think often people think of nursing homes for older people or people who are at that later end of their life, maybe their families can't take care of them. It doesn't seem like for, you know, people kind of as young as you.
And active people.
Yeah.
Active people, we'll put it that way. Well, yeah, there were people that were actually in their 20s and 30s that only had like a broken foot or a broken leg. And I was trying to figure out, what are you still doing here? You need to be at home. You need to be with your kids or in school or watching cartoons on Saturday morning. I don't know, whatever it is you do. But they're still there right now. But we both know what it is, though.
What is it? Money.
Money.
The big green, huh? And what we'll talk more about when we come back after the break, about your experience in the nursing home, your life before your stroke in the nursing home, and how you're doing now. And we're going to talk more about ADAPT too. And do you want to just first define ADAPT before we go to break?
ADAPT is a national grassroots disability rights organization that began 25 years ago in Denver, Colorado. And it started with actually about 12 or 13 young people. And when I say young, they were teenagers. They were kids. The oldest were probably about 19 or 20. The youngest were probably about 12 or 13. And there are nursing homes that literally exist for babies and small children, because that's the way our government is. Our states, our government mandates nursing home care for everyone in every state, but community-based services are optional, and yet it's the community-based services that save the states millions of dollars.
Thank you. We're going to talk more about this great organization, ADAPT, when we come back. You're watching Rochester Indymedia Community Television at its best, and stay tuned and check out rochester.indymedia.org. Be back in a minute.
My name is Grammy. I've been to Chicago, I've been to Florida, I've been to Tennessee, I've been to Seattle.
This one's dedicated to all the freaky people out there. All us lovely freaks and weirdos. We're just trying to make it through life, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it gets rough out there. Just try to keep a sense of humor. Try to stay human, you know what I'm saying? Starvation is a creation of the devil, a rebel. I'm bringing food to the people like a widow. Bringing flowers to a grave in the middle of the city. Isolation is a riddle. To be surrounded by a million other people, but feel alone like a tree in the desert.
I've been with adapted since 2001. I like all the crazy things that the activists do, especially going in the middle of the street.
Scratch my itch like a needle on a record. Full of life like a man going to Mecca. Sky high like an eagle up soaring. I speak low but I'm like a lion roaring. Baritone like a Robeson recording. I'm giving thanks for being human every morning. Because the streets are alive with the sound of boom bap. Can I hear it once again? Boom bap. Tell your neighbor, tell a friend. Every box got a right to be booming.
I don't know, it just helps my mommy to be more independent. For my rights, I'm only a toy.
Be resistant. The negativity, we keep it at a distance. Call for backup and I give you some assistance. Like a lifesaver deep in the ocean. Stay afloat here upon the funky motion. Rock and roll upon the waves of the season.
We're back, Rochester Indymedia, IndyTV, and today we're talking with Anita Cameron, and Moose Hayes, and we're talking about ADAPT, and this is a grassroots disabilities organization that's worked on a lot of change over the years for people with disabilities, and Moose Hayes, who overcame a stroke in 2007. So Moose, let's start with you and give us an idea of how your life was like before your stroke, and then what happened.
Before the stroke, I had a job. I was working every day. I was basically doing what everybody else does, surviving, living. I had my hobbies, such and such. Basically just living a normal life.
Mm-hmm. And out of nowhere, you didn't even think you had health problems?
No health. I've never been to the doctor before this. I've never been sick, aside from a cold or the flu or something, and little childish diseases like chickenpox, measles. That was it.
Mm-hmm. So this was shocking to end up in the
Very
medical
shocking.
establishment. What was that like?
It was culture shock. I mean, I'm a private person. And it's strange to have people come in your room at 5 o'clock in the morning taking blood and giving you shots and asking you when's the last time you went to the bathroom and blah, you know, just too much. Mm-hmm. I didn't like it, period.
Mm-hmm. And how did you make the transition you did from the hospital to a nursing home? How'd that come about?
Well, I thought I was going to something better. And they said, well, you're going to go to this particular place, which I'm not going to name right now. And I said, sure, I guess anything's better than this. Big mistake, even worse.
Can you tell me some of the realities of a life like that? People maybe can't imagine, like some of the things. What is that like?
I got a very sad story to tell, and I don't know if I should tell it now, but I think I will though.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
There was a guy in the room down from me, and for 3 days he kept hollering out, Betty, Betty, and I'm like, I was asking nurses, who's Betty? Said, oh, that's his wife. He's calling for his wife. And I said, well, you should call her and tell her that her husband wants to see her. She said, no, we don't have time. But I said, you got time to order pizza, I see. And at the end of that 3-day period, the poor guy died. And all he wanted to do was just see his wife one last time. That's really sad.
That is very sad. I mean, institutions are just, it seems like you can't have the same kind of care. So what is the goal then? I mean, people want to live independently. People want to be, in your own homes no matter what health crisis happens. People want to try to stay as connected with family and friends as possible. So what kind of things would make that possible to avoid these kind of stories and, other things?
Well, the main thing that would make that possible will actually be the passage of the Community Choice Act. And the Community Choice Act is a piece of legislation that would allow people with disabilities and seniors who are either living in nursing homes or other facilities or at risk of that placement, the choice to be able to live in the community with all of the services and supports that they need. That's the basic premise, if you will. That's Community Choice Act in a nutshell.
And this is a federal?
It's a federal piece of legislation that was introduced last year in the House by Representative Danny Davis, my old rep from Chicago, and John Shimkus. from Illinois, both from Illinois. And then on the Senate side, it was introduced by Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa and Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania. It actually has a very long history. The Community Choice Act started out as a piece of legislation called CASA, Community Attendance Services Act. And how it originally got started was after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which ADAPT was instrumental in getting passed quickly by our direct action and all. ADAPT members sat down, and I was among that group of people that sat down and wrote the began crafting the original version of this legislation. And then we got the legal folks involved to actually craft it, bill version. It was first introduced in the House by then Speaker Newt Gingrich. It actually took lots of protests and whatnot at his house.
So let's talk about that. What is this whole, I mean, ADAPT may be one of the most successful direct action advocacy groups I've ever seen in action. I've been fortunate enough to work with as a sign language interpreter and take my first arrest a couple weeks ago, which I've bragged about, and I got to say it on television. You know, I got arrested doing my job with ADAPT and then went above and beyond that. But what is the direct action tactic and that component, and how does that go hand in hand with legislative work?
Well, ADAPT believes in direct action, which is basically protests, in-your-face activism, totally nonviolent. It's modeled after the civil rights movement, Dr. King, Gandhi, but it's definitely, in your face. It's no more Mr. Nice Guy, if you will. And so, we are, trained, if you will, for lack of a better word, to, not be afraid, of police, to stand our ground. The misconception is you have to get arrested and adapt. You don't. I've been arrested numerous times, 114 times over the 22 years that I've been in ADAPT.
We salute that.
But there are lots of roles that people play in ADAPT, but ADAPT is definitely best known for its direct action, which is extremely effective.
How do you know when to start pulling out that tactic? When does that come out?
Well, I always tell people you always see the end results of what ADAPT is doing. But it all starts with letter writing, meetings, things like that. Usually where the protests come in is when the powers that be or our targets either refuse to meet with us or refuse to work with us. And when that happens, then it's time to, as we say, hit the streets, get in the trenches.
And Moose, you went out for your first time with ADAPT this past month, was it, for the birthday anniversary action in D.C. And how was that experience for you?
It was the most fun I had in a long time. I mean, I think we actually terrified some people in government. That's enjoyable, considering they usually terrify us.
Yeah, that's true. And what were some of the things you took part in that week?
I took part in the thing with McCain's office. I took part in going to the Capitol. I took part in freezing to death.
It's supposed to be spring. What's going on here?
Spring, yeah.
That was very memorable and enjoyable. And as I said earlier, I was there as a sign language interpreter. And we come back, we're going to talk about ADAPT's birthday party in D.C. and some of the actions that took place that week. And thank you, guys. We'll come back right after this break.
Excuse me.
Hey, watch it.
Hey, can somebody turn some lights on in here?
If you need light to access this building, you can have your doctor certify your disability, then ask for special accommodation.
Equal access is a right, not a privilege.
I'm John Schorsch.
I'm Sarah Green.
I'm Deborah Peterson.
And I'm Donna Lawrence.
You're watching Rochester Indymedia, IndyTV, and we're talking today about ADAPT. And what does ADAPT stand for? I always hear ADAPT power. So what is this? It feels powerful. I agree with that.
Well, ADAPT is simply adapt. Way back in the day, when I joined ADAPT in 1986, we were working on access to public transportation. So it stood for American Disabled for Accessible Public Transit. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, ADAPT began hearkening back to its roots of freeing people from nursing facilities and other institutions. And so, and getting a national attendant services program passed. So the acronym was changed to American Disabled for Attendant Programs Today. About 10 years ago, we just dropped that, and ADAPT is ADAPT. It is no longer an acronym, even if the name is spelled in caps. So it's ADAPT. How do you spell power? ADAPT.
How did you get involved with ADAPT, and what have been some of your favorite actions over the years?
I joined ADAPT at the end of 1986. I recently turned 21. I had taken a job at the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. I'm almost totally blind since birth, and I have epilepsy since infanthood. And so I took a job with a gentleman who was not only blind, he was deaf as well, and he used a wheelchair. Gentleman's name, Dennis Schreiber, phenomenal intellect, gifted fundraiser, but the hardest person you'd ever deal with. And I was hired to be Dennis's interpreter and his personal attendant. And a mutual friend of his and my godmother, who was a nun, called my godmother and said, do you know of anyone who can be an attendant for this person? He's a disability rights activist. So my godmother came to me. When I learned that he was a disability rights activist, hey, that hooked me because I had been looking for, a cause, if you will. I've been involved in social justice, social change activities, kind of felt guilty being African American and being born too late to participate in the civil rights movements and do the marches with Dr. King and all. And and
you see the success of this tactic? I mean, 114 arrests, you've got to win something along the way. What kind of improvements have been seen?
The Americans with Disabilities Act would probably be still sitting around waiting to be signed into law, had not ADAPT took over the Capitol Rotunda. And
is that being threatened right now? What's happening with ADA currently, and what's ADAPT going to do if they try to touch it?
It's being watered down. ADAPT is supporting a piece of legislation called the ADA Restoration Act, which would restore the original protections to people with disabilities that were offered in the ADA, because if you have an episodic disability such as epilepsy or diabetes, or if you have, say, cancer that's in remission, or certain disabilities where, medication controls, or certain simple things, what happened was you were stripped of your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you had to prove that you were disabled, and then you had to face that choice of, okay, I'm doing well, my seizures are under control, what do I have to do? Stop taking my meds and, have seizures again to get protection under the ADA. So that travesty is being addressed in this ADA Restoration Act. So that's one of the things that the ADAPT certainly helped to push forward that passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Let's just talk a little bit more about this 25-year anniversary action that happened. What was the focus for that action primarily?
Well, the focus for that was, once again, trying to get passage of the Community Choice Act, which is why we did our scouring of the Hill, which is why we we hit McCain's office in the Republican National Congress.
And how different is it going to look? Moose was talking about nursing homes, just ignoring people, not getting the care, the personal space that you need, these things. And I've actually heard some numbers that it's cheaper for people to live independently. And so what is the difference so people can visualize? What does independent home care mean? I mean, they need help, people need to have assistance.
Well, under the Community Choice Act, and I believe I described it earlier as allowing people the choice to live in the community with all the services and supports that they need, what it would do is, in effect, mandate community-based service in all the states. Right now, all states mandate nursing home care. Community-based services are considered optional. When budget crunches come along, what happens? It's the community-based services that get cut, even though they save the state's money.
And Moose, now how are you? What's your life like now that you're out of the nursing home, and how are you doing, and how is your recovery?
Well, it's not easy, but nothing ever is. But I prefer to be this way than be in a nursing home, actually.
Definitely.
I mean, it's nothing that the nursing home can do for me that I can't do for myself now. And I'd rather do it myself, actually.
Challenges you to recover a little faster, I'd imagine, too, if you're doing it for yourself. And what would you want to tell people who are watching, who maybe want to get involved? Maybe there's people who have family members that they want to help aid and advocate for to be more independent, or people who are able-bodied who want to just be more sensitive and be thinking about, including us here at Public Access TV. I'm very sorry we had our guest today have to hop up on a, kind of a high platform. We didn't have a ramp. We don't have closed caption, and I know as an interpreter I have deaf friends who are asking about having closed caption, and hopefully one day we can have access, because it's not accessible right now. But what would you tell people how to get involved, or what they can do to increase their sensitivity?
Well, they could give the Center for Disability Rights a call at 546-7510 and ask for the advocacy department. They'll usually get Chris Hildebrandt, who's the director of advocacy, or they'll probably get sent to me. And then I can put them on a list, and so when activities come up, when trips come up, they'll know about that, and I can keep them informed. Center for Disability Rights has a website, www.rochestercdr.org, as does ADAPT. ADAPT's website
We can put that up too on the screen.
Yes,
and Moose, what would you, I'm sorry, Anita, but what would you like to say as far as people getting involved, getting off the couch and participating?
I would like to say that the ADAPT people are the most entertaining people I've ever met in my life. They are wonderful. I love them with all my heart.
Thank you. And I'm going to give a shout out to the unofficial mascot of ADAPT. We have Grammy here, and you can check out Grammy too, Grammy Almighty on YouTube. It was a birthday wish to ADAPT. Happy birthday, ADAPT. Thank you, Anita Cameron. Thank you, Moose, for coming today. This has really been great.
Pleasure.
And check out rochester.indymedia.org. And I want to thank again Sean Sessler, Ron Linville, and Andy Dillon for working the studio, and Ben Dean. Much thanks, guys.